You know, there's this whole kind of thing now, they talk about research-led teaching. This is like the most research-led teaching you can get, right? Because it's a project that we're doing, which I lead, called, what's it called? Making Selves, Making Revolutions. Comparative Anthropology of Revolutionary Politics. And it's a 5-year project, and it's funded by the European Union. And it's a big team of researchers, and we're looking at revolutionary politics anthropologically in different parts of the world, particularly Middle East and Latin America, and comparing them. And as part of developing that project, after having done field work in all these different parts of the world with all the different members of the project and all these things, we decided to teach a course, which is the course that you guys are taking, which essentially would be our stepping stone to writing this book that we want to write, which is going to be maybe the same title as the course, The Social Forms of Revolution, whose aim is to develop a distinctively anthropological take on the study of revolutionary politics, right?
Really what we wanted to do was to say something anthropologically relevant about revolution. And we thought that a good way to do that was to do it with the help of the students as well. So the course is really a way for us to test some ideas that we had, or some notions of revolution that we wanted to challenge. I mean, the main point, both of the project and the course, was exactly this. You know, there are certain assumptions about what revolution should be, what it looks like, and some of these assumptions are very strong, and I think we've seen this in the post-Arab Spring period. You know, people had certain expectations of how revolution should be like. What should they achieve? And a certain degree of disappointment in Europe came out of it. You know, how the Arab Spring played out in a way that it wasn't what certain Western analysts wanted it to play out. So in that sense, the main point was to challenge these things, and we had an idea of how to do this. And the way to do this was to look at ethnographically at certain scenarios of revolutions and to see how these scenarios challenge these assumptions. And I think it worked with the course in the sense that we provided the material, we provided the ethnographic material to discuss, but very often the students helped us in the tutorials to realize that, you know, certain assumptions, the contrast perhaps between the assumption and the ethnographic material sometimes is not that strong. You know, so it's not just about problematizing and deconstructing all the assumptions, but it's really putting the assumptions and the ethnography in dialogue. And I think that came out a lot in the tutorial.
There's one of the essay, for instance, writing about ritual and the relationship between ritual and revolution, and particularly this idea of a specific ethnic group in a continuous process of war, of internal war, yeah. So the society never solidifying and drawing a parallel, for instance, with Trotsky's idea of a permanent revolution, yeah. So you know, you always get this idea that really elicits some interesting stuff. Yes, this is really interesting to think about and to develop. You know, this is stuff you get from students, this kind of stuff, yeah. So you know, it's a beautiful way, I think, to construct something, you know, among us, among teachers, students, if you like. Yeah, it's a beautiful way of building knowledge, if you like. Yeah.
Fidel Castro. No question about it. I just wrote a paper, I think I sent it to you guys, just a kind of ethnographic vignette, really, or ethnographic kind of thing, because I was there when Fidel died, which was on the 25th of November of 2016, just a few months ago. I was lucky, in inverted commas, if that's the right word to use. I'd always told myself for the past 20 years, when Fidel dies, I'm getting the first plane and I'm going to Cuba. I'm not going to be absent when that happens. I need to be there because I'm an ethnographer of this country and this is going to be a huge moment, right? And there I am. It just happened when I was there anyway. I wasn't there for a conference. The guy dies, you know. And I was there for 3 days, and it was a really, really poignant 3 days. And one of the things that I understood was how much obviously people who spent the last 20 years complaining about Fidel and the kind of stranglehold that he held in many ways over the population, because he was this kind of megalomaniac leader who kind of always wanted to project his ego across the universe and certainly across the world. And in many ways, the people in Cuba suffered because of that. So he would use a lot of the national wealth to promote, for example, internationalist programs for doctors, curing people across Africa. Cuban doctors were huge in the Ebola crisis. No one recognizes that in the West, right? The Cuban doctors were fundamental in dealing with the Ebola crisis in West Africa just a couple of years ago. So those kinds of things Fidel and Cuba in general has been doing. But a lot of people in Cuba have been saying, what about us? You send all these doctors to West Africa, I get ill, I go to hospital, the situation is dire, right? This kind of thing. So people have been complaining and complaining and complaining and complaining for the past 20 years and more. A lot of people have been calling him a dictator and all these kinds of things, The moment he dies, all these people are like completely blown, like pale in their face, crying, And you ask them what happened, and they say, well, we lost our father, right? So, you can complain about your father. We all complain about our dads, our mothers, whatever. But that doesn't mean we don't love them, right? And there's a very, very strong, extremely strong bond between people and Fidel. So a lot of people will say, I don't know if I'm a revolutionary. Maybe I was in the past, but now I'm really disappointed. But I'm certainly a Fidelista.
So it's got to be Gaddafi, I guess. I mean, the thing with Gaddafi is this, because when I was doing research during my PhD, it was 2006, 2008. So these are the last years of the Gaddafi government, and everyone was angry with him, and it was slowly losing all his consensus, and the bad sides of the revolution, which were much more evident and visible than the good sides. And because I had all this, I guess, all of my Libyan friends were telling me this, and I guess there was this hate against Gaddafi, you know what I mean, that I couldn't help kind of feeling in a sense. But that was in striking contrast with the early Gaddafi, the Gaddafi of the revolution, the revolutionary who managed to decolonize Libya, to kick out the British and achieve so many things. And I think I realized that contrast really when Gaddafi died, when all this footage about him being killed went around. Because I remember seeing it, and I remember thinking, this is affecting me, poor guy, like this guy, okay, did many, many bad things, but also did good things,
I've met Morales once, we had dinner once, but that was many years ago before he got into power. So in a way, the story around Morales, it's simply beautiful, the story of how he got to power and how he became a leader of the coca growers movement, and how he became from a really poor llama herder living in the highlands at 4,000 meter. Then he became, he worked as a trumpeter, he worked as an ice cream seller, he worked as sugarcane, in the sugarcane harvest, and then eventually he became, a guild leader among coca growers in Bolivia, and then from there. And the story is simply fantastic, so this kind of person who was born and raised in a remote community in the highlands, find himself in the presidential palace and having to take decisions that somehow he never thought of in his own life, so in his entire life. So the whole story for me is just, to think about that, it's just beautiful, the whole story, it's a beautiful story. And
I mean, that's one of the things that happen when you do fieldwork. You kind of develop, in some strange way anyway, you develop a relation even with these distant figures, not just with your friends. It's the same. Martin, I guess, has a relationship with Fidel. Nico has a relationship with Evo somehow, I got the crazy one, but it's fine, But somehow you develop that sort of that I guess, you can call it a relationship, so yeah.